too.
All right, here we go.
Okay, here we go.
He and I talk
Here's
on
the
Facebook
red
all the time.
Don't mean to interrupt.
I think Steve brought it up.
I'll keep it to a minimum
today. I think you've
5:50 KTSA News Time is 10:09. The weekend starts now with our gang of four. We'll meet the gang. We'll kick around the big stories of the day and the week with the gang and with you. You can vote in the JR poll at 210-599-5555. On our gang today, I don't know why he's walking around.
Just get my exercise.
I thought you were heading for the
exercise.
Usually he doesn't head for the door till the show gets started. Is judge for the Texas 4th Court of Appeals.
Yes, sir.
Steve Hilbig.
Glad to be here as always.
Do we all need to rise?
Oh, no.
Take the oath?
I don't have my robe on. They only let me rent it.
All right. Well, how are you doing? You're running for re-election this year.
Up for re-election and staying busy doing that. Have a fundraiser coming up. Actually, I'm going to turn 60 on March 22nd.
Congratulations.
Well, thank you. Everybody says I don't look a day over 59. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And but I was going to have a fundraiser on my birthday, but one of my colleagues is going to have a fundraiser on my birthday, and she wouldn't give it up.
How
She wouldn't
dare
give
she?
me. She wouldn't give me my birthday
Oh.
present. So anyway,
The
but,
cutthroat world of politics.
It is,
All right. Steve Hilbig is here. Ken Slavin is back. By day, public relations. By night, the smooth, silky sounds of the great American songbook.
Yay.
What are you up to these days?
Thank you. Well, there's been some changes made.
Yes.
I have phased out of Ken Slavin Public Relations and Consulting, and I just accepted a new job about a month ago with a wonderful nonprofit called Accion, Texas. And you may be familiar with them. They've been in town for almost 20 years. They provide capital and other forms of lending to small minority and women-owned businesses. And they are in 8 states now and have been growing a communications department. And they hired me on as communications manager, and I'm working with a vice president, and her name is Veronica Flores Paniagua. She used to be a columnist and editor with the Express News. You probably know her. And she and I have known each other for years. So I've started the job and enjoying it very much. The department handles not just public relations and media relations, but all the internal communications, the marketing pieces for the various loan offices in the various states. So I'm doing that, and I'm still performing at night.
Any gigs coming up that we should?
Yeah, I'll be in Austin tomorrow night at Three Forks.
Okay.
I was there last weekend too, so right in the heat of South by Southwest.
Sure.
And still performing in San Antonio about once a month at the Boardwalk Bistro. And just, gigs, all the gigs I can do, and have a new manager/agent who's doing some searching for me and trying to book me around the state and maybe up in the Midwest somewhere.
if somebody wants to book you, how do they get hold of you?
They go to kenslavin.com. But anyhow, thanks for asking, Jack,
Sure.
and I'm glad to be back. It's been a while
We're
since
glad
I've
to
been
have you back, and we're glad to have Jay LaFarr back for his second time on Gang of Four, comedian who often appears at the Laugh Out Loud Comedy Club and other places around the country. What's new with you?
Same old crap.
Yeah.
Work. Just working.
Well, you just had the big the benefit.
Oh, yeah, for
comedy
the
show,
Humor
right?
for
That was what,
Heroes.
last Thursday.
Yeah, that was great. We it was sold out. We raised a lot of money.
Yeah.
And it was great. And I'm just so proud to be a part of that. And they've got more coming up. And you can always, if you go to Humor for Heroes on Facebook, you can always find out what the events are there. And I'll be at the Laugh Out Loud next week. I'm actually performing there.
During the week next week?
During the week, yeah. And this week, just going around and watching the Funniest in South Texas competition they have going on.
All right. Well, let's start with this. All this week there's been this talk about this soldier in Afghanistan. And the New York Times is reporting today that the American staff sergeant accused in those killings had been drinking. Now, we had heard earlier in the week that it was a brain injury, but now they're saying he had been drinking and suffering the stress related to his 4th combat tour, tensions with his marriage, and an unnamed official told the New York Times when it all comes out, it will be a combination of stress, alcohol, and domestic issues. It almost sounds to me like this is a microcosm of the whole deployment. I mean, this is the story in a nutshell. You're sending guys back there 3, 4, 5 times. How could it not be a stress issue and a marital issue and a family issue and everything else? It's like it's almost like this has gotten our attention because it's one person.
Well, and what's interesting is that that's in the face of President Obama wanting again to reduce the military, so that you're going to have, unfortunately, folks having more deployments. And I think I saw something on Yahoo online or something that people are Americans are war weary, and I'm not so sure that we're necessarily war weary. But as we talked after the capture of Osama bin Laden, what's our mission over there? We don't have a defined mission, and I think that's what hurts the most, is that people get dispirited because we just don't understand what our mission is.
Well, and that adds to the war weariness. I absolutely believe people are war weary. It's gone on and on and on, and these there's a whole faction of people in the United States, I think, who have tuned it out. It's just like, it's just going on. There are younger people who probably don't even remember what it was like not to be having wars or things that we're involved with around the world that way. But there's absolutely no way that the troops can be stretched this thin and sent back over and over and over again without explosive incidents like this. There are probably lots of other awful things happening along those lines that don't make the headlines.
Jay, a lot of our callers said, it's amazing it took this long.
I think that there's probably fewer instances in this war than in most other wars where things like that have occurred. I mean, World War II, American troops, let's face facts, our troops have always been on the side of good and just about everything. I mean, sometimes our political things get clouded up, but our troops are generally there to do good. But there's always going to be atrocities committed by them. They just didn't make the news in World War II. They'd shoot German prisoners, but it was just considered part of war. But our attitudes have changed in the last 60 years. And now anything is immediately on the news because soldiers carry video cameras on their phones. They're taking pictures and showing them urinating on Quran. Things like
that's definitely a reflection of our technological age and the 24-hour news cycle that did not exist.
But isn't what Jay's saying that we want war, but we don't want to know the stuff we don't want to know?
How many people actually think about the war on a daily? Most people don't, unless you have family that's over there. Most Americans just go on with their lives. They're acting like it's not happening.
That's why I wonder what war weariness means, because in World War II, Americans might have been weary of rationing and shortages, but how is the country tired? Yeah, but I mean, in what way would we be tired?
Think an example of their being tired is they zone it out. They don't care about it. I think when you're fully, I think that early on,
but it's not like it's taking a toll on us, right?
The day after 9/11, America was galvanized. This country came together. Everyone, it didn't matter what political leaning you had, left wing, right wing, everyone was there, and we were all like, we were Americans for
at the beginning of the conflicts that we're in now. Is that what you're talking about, or just in general?
Things first started, I mean, let's face facts. Congress and the Senate overwhelmingly voted to go to war. They said, we're going to support this president, we're going to go. But then a couple months later, they're like, well, maybe not now. And they distanced themselves, a lot of them did.
I just think I do believe that when you grow weary of something, and something goes on in a protracted way with kind of losing its focus, as Steve was saying, I kind of call that weariness too. You turn off. At least I do.
Where did we get the idea, Steve Hilbig, that you go into a country for the purposes of catching the people that launched the attack, preventing them from staging another attack, but then because you're there, you now have to paint the buildings and rebuild the roads and improve the sewage systems. I mean, an empire would do that because it was going to permanently stay and occupy and annex that land. We're not doing that. So we incur the expense of an empire without any of the benefits of an empire.
Well, I think what's going on is that we want folks to like us. We want people.
How's that working out for us?
Yeah, well, I mean, again, but you asked why did we do that? Well, number one, it's the win the hearts and minds strategy. If you're going to have insurgents, this is the Vietnam War lesson. If you're going to have insurgents, you have to win the hearts and minds, as we said in Vietnam. I think to a degree also there's something that goes on in terms of we want to leave the place better so that democracy will take hold. And the problem is you're not going to be able to change a national consciousness by, improving the infrastructure. I mean, it has to come from within, and that is a much longer process. So it goes back again, what was our focus? I think when President Bush went over there, it was kind of like, okay, we're going to get the people that made 9/11 possible. That was the mission. And again, we go back, we kind of took care of that mission with getting Osama bin Laden. Now what's our mission? Well, are we in the nation building? But we all said, I think, in our previous campaigns that, we weren't into nation building, although that's exactly what we're doing over in Iraq.
Isn't that the part that people are weary of? I mean, in other words, if American soldiers, if we were getting reports every day, Jay, that we were fighting, capturing, killing terrorists or people that had attacked us as terrorists,
People will be happy.
I think people would be very amped about that.
Yeah.
I think the weariness is another day of driving around with trucks and delivering pumpkin seeds to farmers and getting shot at and blown up, and we can't fight back because we have to observe all these rules, and that's what people have had it with.
Well, our troops. I've spoken to a lot of the troops after shows and people who've been wounded over in Iraq and Afghanistan. And the other thing is that most of them still support the mission. They support everything going on over there, and they've seen it through eyes that most of us will never see it.
Do they articulate to you what they perceive the mission to be?
Their mission was to get the bad guys. So, like, they don't, because they're troops, though, and their thing is they go where they're told. And some
Sure.
people look at that as stupid. You're just following what you're told. Well, yeah, because that's what you do when you're in the military. You follow your orders and you do what you're supposed
Right.
to do. Now, a lot of people can't do that, and I respect the people who don't want to go to war. I do. But the people who have gone over there, I get annoyed when people denigrate them here.
But who are? I mean, I guess what you're saying is that they support the mission in terms of, yes, they want to get over there, get the bad guys,
But the
make it
mission's
a better
over.
place.
Yeah, you made a good point. The mission's over. We've done what we went there to do. We got Osama bin Laden and we got Saddam Hussein. We've ended the war. We've gotten almost all of the bad guys out of Al Qaeda. The problem is we're never going to get them all because every time we kill one, 10 more pop up. Because we're not going to change their hearts and minds. They don't like us. They don't like America. They don't like the fact that women can drive cars here. They don't like the fact that you can have a mosque next to a Catholic church and they can pretty much peacefully coexist. And that's something that annoys a lot of Islamic extremists. Most Muslims aren't Islamic extremists, but enough are over there, especially the ones who are in the Taliban, who will never, ever, ever accept America.
I think one of the main points is, and I get tired of us presuming that we can create democracies everywhere in the world. I just don't think culturally they will exist in certain places no matter what you do. So why are we doing it?
Should we have learned from the Soviets, the British, all of these other people that went to Afghanistan and got flushed out? Should we have known that this was going to happen?
Well, but going back, if the original mission was we don't want to allow Afghanistan to be a haven for Al Qaeda, we want to take care of the people and hurt the people in the organization that did 9/11. I mean, I think that was justifiable reason for going over there.
Yes.
But we've kind of lost our way. I mean, what is it? Are we nation building? We're now hearing like, oh my gosh, we can't leave because the Taliban are going to come back in and impose all the restrictions on women again, which kind of goes back to the cultural thing. Well, if there was support within the culture over there to say women are going to have equal rights as men, then the Taliban wouldn't be able to do that.
Let's be honest, though. We didn't care about the women.
We didn't.
Until 9/11.
But all of a sudden, I don't
this
think we cared
business
about
of-
them after 9/11. We only care about them now.
We didn't
It's a
care about the
rationale.
women. We didn't care about the not being a democracy. We didn't care about any of that stuff. So we've tacked on all these other missions, and that feeds that conspiracy theory of perpetual war that the government profits from and politicians prefer a state of perpetual war, when in reality the only thing we ever cared about was getting the terrorists and securing the oil. And I think people will never tire of you doing those two things. I don't think there's any war weariness if you're doing one of those two things.
But where do we secure the oil? Name one place that we've gone into.
I agree.
We haven't secured oil for our
If we have
use.
any interest in that part of the world, isn't it really the oil? I mean, to get
Does
right down to
Afghanistan
it.
have oil?
No, but my point is, if you're in the Middle East in general, let's be honest. It's not to build democracy or free the women or whatever. It's because there's oil there. If there was no oil there, we would let that place be the most godforsaken armpit. We joke about how little
What about
we
the
cared about
falafel?
it. And the falafel.
The falafel is delicious. I got it.
We're coming back with Gang of Four, but first on this Friday morning into the 550 KTSA newsroom, and here's Karen.
And the Department of Homeland.
All right, here we go. It's 10:28 on the news and talk of San Antonio, 550 KTSA. Judge Steve Hilbig, Ken Slavin, Jay LaFarr, all here on Gang of Four today. You can vote in the JR poll at 210-599-5555. Texas is fighting with the federal government again. This time, yeah. What else is new? This time over the Voting Rights Act of 1965 and our new law, which we are waiting and seeing if we can implement, that would require a photo ID to vote. Other states have passed photo ID laws, but Texas is not being allowed to because of something called Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act. We are considered one of the states with a history of racial discrimination. Therefore, the federal government gets to say yes or no to any changes that we make in terms of elections and administering elections and voters. Am I right about that,
Yes,
Judge?
sir. Yes,
okay. So there are two issues here. First, should you have to show with a photo ID, prove who you are to vote? Should Texas still be considered by the federal government unreliable, untrustworthy, like some kind of banana republic when it comes to elections?
Yeah, what's interesting is that the Supreme Court has written about affirmative action, and we had cases from Texas going up there on admission to colleges, and in their writings about affirmative action, they say at a point in time, that comes to an end. In other words, you no longer have to remediate what has happened in the past.
You've made up for the past.
Yes, and so they have specifically talked about that with affirmative action. But here, in essence, you've got affirmative action for voting. In other words, we're going to make sure that you don't continue to discriminate as you have historically done. And that law has now been on the book for 50 years, and it's kind of like close to 50 years. And so you would think that the Supreme Court might look at it and apply similar reasoning to the Voting Rights Act that they have applied to affirmative action issues.
Ken, the government requires people to do all kinds of things for licensure. The guy that cuts my hair has to have a license with his photo and a certificate from the state. It's ridiculous. I mean, everything. And yet we are told by these same politicians who want state licensures and affirmative photo ID proof for all these other things that voting should be on the honor system.
And I don't get it. I don't get it at all. It's been hard for me to understand it as an issue. I don't understand why it's automatically considered a racial thing, a racist thing, just because you need to prove who you are. In fact, until this became such a big public issue, I already thought you had to. I always brought my driver's license and my voter registration card to any polling place to prove who I was. You know, I fail to see the argument for it being racist. I feel in some cases at this point in Texas and elsewhere, it's just another pandering just to look like you're watching out for someone when it really isn't true.
It's ridiculous that anyone would assume that you don't have to show a picture ID. The people who are complaining about it are the same ones who are worried that illegals aren't going to have welfare, who are worried that they won't get into college. How about let's just accept the fact I have to show my license to do just about everything here. I own a defensive driving school in town where you have to be certified by this. You have to actually send in all types of stuff so you can be credentialed. And voting is one of the most important things we do as a citizen, and the fact that people don't have to show ID, and in Texas, that's almost like a Jim Crow law just for Texas, that we've been relegated as a second-class state. I don't, and I'm not from Texas. I love this place. It's one of the few states left where you can fly the flag and people are still proud of that. A lot of places are not doing that anymore. Why wouldn't you have to show? And I don't understand people who can't jump on board with that, because
I think there's a couple issues going on. I mean, one is I think we want to increase voter participation, and
Well,
I always tell folks that you ought to have intelligent voters, not somebody who blindly go in and just pull a lever. But so the problem is there is some argument to why do we want to make voting harder, but I think the answer to that is not, okay, so let's not have ID, but just make sure that you have a very easy way of having people get whatever identification they need for the purposes of voting.
I don't understand.
It seems like
I don't understand why it isn't already done. You have identification from the minute you're born.
Charge on our income tax or whatever. We're having a whatever, so that every citizen in Texas, regardless of financial capacity, can have an ID card, a legal identification.
Well, in fact, the law provides that. The law says that you can get a card if you don't have a license. You don't have to go get a license.
Yeah, but you can get an identification card, but
Right.
it costs money.
Well, in this law, you can go get the ID.
Then that's fine. Then why doesn't everyone
But
do that?
Let me tell you what Joaquin Castro said to us this week. State Representative Joaquin Castro came on to argue against this. And one of the things he says and others say is, hey, where's the problem? Where's the evidence that there's voter fraud? Where's the evidence that it's changing the outcome of elections? He's saying that there's no return on this investment. We shouldn't worry about this. What do you say to that?
That's spoken like a Chicago Democrat would. Someone who's going to get every illegal vote they possibly can. And where's his base going to come from? A highly Hispanic base, many of whom, if they were allowed to vote, would vote for him if they were illegal.
So we suspect that Democrats are opposed to this because they might benefit from those gray area voters. And we suspect that Republicans are for it because they want to prevent or suppress those gray area voters. That's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah, but let's go back. I mean, to the premise of where's the problem. The problem is that we have never tried to measure if there is a problem. And so both people are speaking about the unknowns.
Well, you only know about fraudulent votes when you catch them.
Right, and I'm not sure that in-person voting is the most fraudulent way that people do it. I mean, this absentee ballot, the mail-in ballots, boy, you talk about. And when I was DA, we did some investigations on the illegal voting by absentee ballots. But going back to it, I mean, both sides are saying, well, show me where there is a problem. The other side is saying, you know, well, we assume that there probably is a problem just given the nature of things. But both of those are spurious arguments. And I guess the reality is, why don't you want to have the best system possible where we make sure that those eligible to vote are the ones that are voting? And I don't understand the problem with that basic premise. If somebody says we're making it harder, it's kind of like, fine, then let's worry about those details about making sure that you still have access to the vote. But why don't we want integrity in our system? Why don't we want security in our system?
Your Honor, what would you...
By honor. Oh my gosh.
Well, I'd like to show respect.
Well, thank you.
Sir, but what would you do then to make sure that could happen? I mean, the only way is a picture ID to make sure that people, when they vote, are and absentee voters. How many of them really are there in Texas? And
Oh, lots. So we have extended voting in Texas, and so in essence, you get to vote for whatever reason you want in person, either 2 to 3 weeks, I forget the time period, before the actual voting. So like in Bexar County, you get close to half of your vote occurs in the early voting period. We call it early voting as opposed to absentee voting. And it's not like it used to be where you had to have an excuse. I swear I'm going to be out of town on election day. And so I think that, again, most people nowadays think that we're not disenfranchising people. I think that folks, though, want to put up the straw man is, no, wait a second, you will disenfranchise the poor, you will disenfranchise the elderly because they don't have the ability to get IDs. And I think that the answer is not to, well, then let's forget about securing our system. I think the answer is, well, let's make sure that we take care of those problems. Even if it costs us extra money, if what you're worried about is the security of the system, then isn't that worth the go?
well, yeah, and plus the cost would be negligible. I mean, when it comes right down to it, statewide, the number of people who are legal citizens who need identification, it would be next to nothing. I mean, other than postage and mail, you know, the actual card.
I must be obtuse. I do not understand how you can have a life in the United States and not have had to have an identification of some sort. I don't get it. I don't understand why this has suddenly become an issue. I mean, you can't live in the United States without having. You can't work without a social security number. You can't. You know, you're not supposed to.
But think of an elderly person.
But that person would have had to have had an ID of some sort.
Yes, but their driver's license lapsed. No, there's like, you know, so fine. They had an ID.
But they had a social security number.
Yeah, but that's not a photo ID.
A lot of legals have fake ones. A lot of people in this country live. We have them in San Antonio. There's
I just don't understand why it's considered a racist issue when it's
an election
year.
Well, let's also point this
issue.
out to the point that Steve was making. The Texas law, modeled after the laws in other states, says that if you're 65 and over and you do not have the photo ID already, it'll be provided to you at no cost. You can also vote by mail, in which case you don't even need it. And you can vote, anybody in Texas can vote provisionally, meaning if you go to the polling place and you don't satisfy the requirement, you can still vote, and you have up to, I think it's 6 days, Greg Abbott told us, to come back and prove that your vote is valid. So when you've put all that in there, it doesn't exactly sound like we're taking 2x4s and beating people up at the polling place, does it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's unfortunately how some people want to spin it, is that, oh my gosh, they're trying to make it where we're denying people who have a legitimate
So they're
right to vote.
invoking something that really did happen in the past,
Yes.
but it's not happening now.
At least I'm not aware that it's happening now. I'll go at you that way. And if there is proof that people are being denied the right to vote, then I think that is something that needs to be dealt with seriously. But I mean, frankly, I hadn't heard about it.
It's just very suspicious to me that you would say, and Representative Castro even said in our interview, we want to err on the side of the people. Well, your constitutional oath is to protect the validity of every vote. So by making voters affirm who they are, you're also protecting my vote, because you're not letting my vote be canceled out by, Mr. X, who's not an eligible voter, or who's voting for the second time or the third time or whatever.
Well, and what's interesting is that the reason we have all these redistricting fights is because the Supreme Court, in essence, has said you ought to make sure that you have one man, one vote. In other words, that everybody's vote counts equally. You don't want to have a congressional district with 1 million people and a congressional district with 200,000
Right.
people, because in essence the people in the 200,000 have a better say. And so it's almost the flip side of that.
Right.
Why do you want to have extra votes that should not be cast dilute the value of your vote and everyone else's vote? And as you pointed out, no one really talks about that issue.
But isn't U.S. history based? I mean, that's what the Senate's about. Each state gets 2 senators, despite the size of the state or its contribution to the country. I mean, Hawaii has the same number of senators as Texas. So
This was a big issue when our country was started. We're going to talk next week to a guy that wrote a book about James Madison. They really had to hammer out the idea that the Senate would be equal representation for the states, and the House would be population-based representation, because the original Articles of Confederation made all of the states equal, gave all of the states equal representation in the original Congress, and that simply didn't work for a growing country with people moving around and shifting populations. But to me, it's really clear. I get the motivation of Republicans and Democrats. I get what games they're playing with this. But if you're an elected office holder and you've taken an oath, it's clear that your job is to defend the sanctity and the veracity of the vote, period, and let the chips fall where they may. And if modern technology allows photo ID verification, hey, we didn't have it 50 years ago because we didn't have the ability to do it. But now we do. You got to have it.
I mean, it almost harkened back to the poll tax, where the idea was that you had to be a property owner in order to be able to
Right.
vote, and then you had to pay the poll tax in order to vote, and all that. And so we've removed the barriers. And again, I think that there are false arguments being made in an attempt to divert people's attention from the real issue.
Not that
security of the
that ever
ballot.
happens.
Oh, no.
All right, we're back with Gang of Four. It's 10:41 into the 550 KTSA newsroom. Karen Klaus.
In support for
Video podcast by Monday. You can also find all of our stuff. All of our podcasts are now in the iTunes store. So
All
if you're a Gang
right.
of Four fan, we're in the iTunes store.
Oh, so you can purchase them.
Free. It's
Oh,
a
it's
free
free?
download.
I mean,
Ken,
iTunes?
do I look like someone who would? Well, don't answer that.
Who would
Yes.
charge?
Whatever you say, yes.
Well,
Do I look like someone who could get any money for this?
Well, I thought if it's in iTunes, you have to pay for it. You can
No. You get free
No,
stuff.
there's a lot of free iTunes
Yes.
things.
just- well, my songs on iTunes aren't free.
And they shouldn't.
They're 99
That's right.
cents a piece.
Damn right.
I would purchase one.
And worth every penny.
That's right.
Jay LaFarr is here. He's a comedian. You can see him at the Laugh Out Loud Comedy Club and many other places as well. Ken Slavin is appearing at Three Forks in Austin
Tomorrow night. Tomorrow
weekend,
night, 7 to
tomorrow night.
11.
And Judge Steve Hilbig is appearing on the bench.
Whatever. Nightly. Three shows a day.
He's very judgmental. All right.
Matinee.
So, Rick Santorum had a very good week. He won the Alabama and Mississippi primaries. He
He crushed, didn't he?
He won the states, but it's funny how this is working out. Romney keeps winning more delegates, and actually, when it was all said and done, Romney's delegate lead had increased. So, there's almost a little bit of media malpractice here in a way, because the real story is getting the delegates, and Romney's actually doing that. But I'm sure people who just casually follow the news would think that Santorum and Romney are like neck and neck, right, Ken?
Yes, that's exactly right. And of course, that's why that's being played up. It's also being played up by the Santorum side, and of course, Romney's trying to play it up the same. So I mean, that's their news angle, and I guess Romney must not be doing as good of a job because it seems to be getting.
Well, it's weird to me though that when they ask these voters, Jay, what's the most important issue? Electability. The voters who say that then heavily favor Romney.
Yeah.
So it's almost like we're using the primaries to show or send a message, but in the end, these voters know that they're going to vote for Romney over Obama anyway.
Well, I think this whole contest now is deciding who the vice president candidate is going to be. I mean, Romney's overwhelming. He's going to win. And Santorum, I liked him, but that apparently he wants to outlaw pornography. That was the big Yahoo thing.
Did he lose you over that?
No, you know what though? Those are the silly things that you hear that will sway voters, and then it'll add one more thing. If he would just not talk about, like, why would pornography even come into that's just, they're looking for things now, the Republicans, to separate themselves and seem more conservative.
But doesn't it seem odd to you that they would be talking about anything but the economy? That's such a rich...
That's the only thing they should be talking about. That and then the war right after that, which unfortunately has, with the economy right now, kind of has to take the back burner.
You used the word earlier when I was driving in. I heard you talking about pandering when it came to making issues over languages, over English as an official language. That's more of the same. They don't have, a lot of these candidates don't appear to have truly solid answers to what to the economy. They're trying to pander to extreme, in the case of the Republicans, I think, to some of the extreme conservative views by bringing up these non-issues. They're not that they don't have some place, I guess, in people's lives, but pornography and some of the other things that aren't as important right now to the country really have nothing to do with advancing the country at this point. That's what they're thinking, that they're going to win over some voters just by saying those things, and whether they believe it or not.
But I think Jay had it right, though, in terms of everybody agrees, and they all have the same positions when it comes to how we fix the economy. Less regulation, we got to repeal Obamacare, and all of these things. So
they're differentiating themselves?
That's exactly right.
Okay.
And so what they want to do is differentiate themselves on the social issues, because that's what Santorum believes. Santorum thinks that he can win on the social issues by appealing to the conservative voters who tend to predominate.
But they seem to be a little
primary.
bit. Some of them don't even seem to be really important social issues to me.
Well, let's
at
take
all.
internet porn, for example. You can say I'm against it, and as president I would fight it, but if you know anything at all about the internet, you know that you would only be able to shut down sites whose servers are in the United States. And the nature of the internet is that you can access a website that is hosted in Albania or something. So it's an empty promise.
Sure.
It really means very little.
Which ought to tell people about the candidate. I mean,
Yes.
That's my point. I guess I didn't put it very well, but that's my point. It's really a non-issue.
How do I take a guy seriously when he makes a promise that even I can figure out, and I'm no expert, doesn't mean anything?
When Newt talked about putting people on the moon,
Thank you.
which honestly,
and Mars.
Yeah, doing things. I can understand why they want to do that, because it sounds good and it sounds like you have vision, but sometimes those are crazy visions. And stopping pornography in general will never happen, because that's the largest, entertainment industry in the country, quite honestly.
But you have to also realize that their message is getting filtered. In other words, I think going back to Jack's point, the media is deciding what message they want to get from the candidate to the voters, or to the general public. And I think there is some shaping going on. And I'm not supporting Newt by any means, but back in the 90s when he was speaker, he came into town, and I was talking to a friend of mine, and I says, dadgummit,
he should stop all this other stuff. Talk about how the Republican Party helps the small individual. It helps you get to a better position in life, better economically. It helps your children, helps your grandchildren, and that's the message they need to be talking about. He comes into town, he has that same message. That he almost gave that speech. And then I walk away like, why aren't we hearing that? And he, in essence, said, I'm talking about that up in Washington, but they're not choosing to highlight that when they do news stories. And so I think there is something to the media wanting to create the storyline going, because once it's finally the Republican nominee versus Obama, the story's not going to be as interesting for them, because they're not going to be able to highlight how the Republicans are destroying each other, therefore please vote for Obama.
Honestly, you'd be my candidate. If he has too many credibility issues as far as family value type of things, which they'll tear him apart. And
I'm tired of hearing that, because that didn't do any, there was nothing, it didn't affect Clinton.
Yeah, but
it hasn't
he's a Democrat. There's a difference. Republicans aren't the same
but
as
you
Democrats.
can eventually stand up for that. That's just a whole other
No, but
argument.
Republicans value have different, and it's the same. We all have the same values. Let's face facts. All Americans want the same crap. And ultimately, even if you're a conservative, you really don't care what anyone else does, or you shouldn't, because you should just worry about making sure your family's lives are as secure as they can be. It's just how we do it. Conservatives want less government in their lives, unless it involves making sure other people.
Some do, but some conservatives just want to use the government to enforce the things they prefer.
Well, they want to put their morals on other people. That's what we want to use the government for.
And so you can't say that conservatives across the board want less government.
No, I'm a fiscal conservative.
To me,
I'm more-
Santorum
I don't
sounds
care
like a
what
guy
he
that
does.
has a lot of ideas about government and things he'd like to see the government do, and things that would involve intruding on your lives and your choices. That at the end of the day, that's not conservative.
No,
that's big government.
He's Obama.
Just getting word that we have verdicts in the Rutgers case, the case of the roommate that was spying
poor
on
kid.
the kid that threw himself off the bridge. We're going to have those verdicts in the top of the hour news here from ABC, and Karen Klaus with more of the news at 11 o'clock. It's 10:55 on KTSA.
Karen.
The queen of morning news over there, Karen Klaus.
Lovely. Quite lovely.
There was a story that I had been kind of keeping an eye on all week. It looked like it would be kind of a cool story. Some people were walking along a beach in Galveston, and they found a pair of what appeared to be human lungs. Now you talk about, that's a story, right? That's the first page of a novel you would not be able to put down, right? Well, sorry to disappoint everybody, or maybe just disappoint me. It turns out they were just dolphin lungs. I don't know, but I'm disappointed.
Can dolphins
I guess
use for
gives new
transplants?
meaning to the expression coughing up your lungs.
Not as disappointed as the dolphin is, but I'm disappointed.
How strange that they just were by themselves.
So I can't write that book. 11:09 on 550 KTSA. Comedian Jay LaFarr, Ken Slavin, and Judge Steve Hilbig all on the gang today. And you're voting in our JR poll at 210-599-5555. All right, so we were talking about this in the 9 o'clock hour of our show. Rick Santorum was campaigning in Puerto Rico, and he was renewing his call. It's a call that other Republican candidates, Romney and Gingrich, have also made, for English to be the official language of the United States. I've been hearing about this for years. What does that mean? Steve Hilbig, what form would the official language take?
When I hear that, I take that to mean that all government business would be conducted in English. Now, that doesn't mean, I think when I was
Ballots,
listening to you,
papers,
Right.
forms. Okay.
Right. Now, that doesn't mean that I think, as you were perhaps wondering, that if private citizens chose to conduct private business and all that, fine.
They could.
And I think it wouldn't prohibit a government who says, well, you know what, we want to reach out and make sure that all citizens can conduct business with the government, and so we'll put out informational pamphlets or whatever in different languages. I don't think that would prohibit any of that. But it's kind of like a courtroom, and it was kind of funny when I was listening to y'all coming in. You go down to a courtroom and it's English. If somebody's testifying in Spanish, we have a translator.
Right.
And there are communities, down in Laredo for instance, they're translating into English when I bet almost everybody in that courtroom is just as familiar with what's going on when the Spanish is spoken. And so I'm
So
not
it would
sure
only
what
be
difference it would
governments
make.
and government entities would be able to still choose to extend them.
Yeah.
So how is that different from what we have now?
That's my point. It's already de facto. It's already done. The government business is already conducted this way. This seems like there's no reason to even make a movement about this. It's already there. It already exists.
What's in it for me? I mean, why?
All that is making some kind of political statement to
Jay,
people
what do you
who
say?
don't like
English should be a requirement
Spanish.
for citizenship. If you can't speak it, then you're not buying into the system. You're not trying to become an American because English is the language that's spoken here.
So-
if you're not willing to do that, then you're not willing. You're
Okay.
not willing to do what you have to do.
And I agree with that. That if you're naturalizing people, part of the naturalization process
Oh, well,
is
sure, but that's not what I was saying. I was just
proficiency
saying
in
government's
English.
already conducted
Proficiency,
English.
but let's face facts. Probably a lot of our grandparents, if you're or in neighborhoods, I don't know about a lot of you guys. Back home, there were people who were from Germany or Italy or Poland, and they all spoke English because that's what they had to do to
Right.
learn to become an American. They
Right.
learned the language here, but at home they usually spoke German or Italian or Polish because that's the language they were familiar with. But they would learn so that they could conduct commerce, and people don't seem to be buying into that. If you want to keep your language and culture, that's a wonderful thing, but don't believe that you can come up here and just live the same life that you lived down there. There's a reason you left the country you came from.
But isn't it also true, Jay, when you talk about the immigrant experience, that the first generation, they might learn some English, but it's broken English, it's heavily accented, and they're more comfortable in the original language.
Oh, sure.
Second generation, more bilingual, more comfortable, less of an accent, maybe no accent. By the third generation or the fourth generation, the old language is gone.
Oh yeah.
I mean, people in my generation, of my family, none of us speak Italian. None of us remember it. We didn't have to know it. But you go back a couple of generations and it was Italian. So why are we worrying if that's the experience people
My
have
mother's an
anyway?
immigrant to this country, but within 6 months after being here, she could read, write, and speak the language. She's from London.
And she did that even though it wasn't official. She did it because it was practical, right?
Well, yeah.
It made sense to do that.
Well, she's British, so it kind of worked.
No, okay. But I mean, doesn't it make sense, though, that
didn't
people
hear that
learn the
part.
language?
It does make sense, and I just don't understand how people won't learn it. I mean, I've met people who've been here for 20 years who don't speak any English. I understand how that happens because they create their own communities where they'll have a doctor who speaks Spanish or whatever language happens to be the local grouping. But they'll have a grocery guy who does, the mechanic, and so they can create these little sub communities. But then again, they're not buying into America, and that's what you need to do if you're going to live here.
See,
Well-
and it goes beyond that though, because like schools, because I think that the decision to say whether or not English is the official language then affects schools and requirements in terms of, well, are you mandated to then have bilingual program in the school? And I think that's where some of the more controversial issues come about, because I think some people feel like, well, okay, if you say English is the official language, well, then we're not going to mandate that schools have a bilingual program to bring people, integrate people into
The problem with mandating language is that you can issue the order, but down at the ground level where people actually operate, you've got to meet them where they live.
Yeah.
So, right?
Yeah, but I think your thought is that you're going to have language police, and my
No.
point is that I don't
I
think that's
accept
any
that.
part of it.
I accept that. But if you are proposing, for example, that you can no longer offer in public schools bilingual, then you are incurring a new expense, and you're passing that expense onto the school district. Are you going to charge them? Are you going to pay them? Are you going to give them the money to do whatever kind of immersion or rapid training or whatever is going to be
Legal
No, I
required?
think some of the people think that by having English as the official language, that you then don't worry about the bilingual. In other words, that you're going to be saving money because the school is not going to be required to have bilingual programs.
Yeah, but then the kids that can only learn science in Spanish aren't learning science, and they're not moving forward, and now you have to do the remedial work, which costs money.
Well, I mean, a couple things. Number one, I hate to tell you how much remedial work goes on graduating from
Anyway.
people from high school to
Who
college.
need people
But
to-
number two, see, those decisions ought to be made based, as you point out, on the need. What's the best way to get from point A to point B? If we want an educated society, what is the best way to get there? And those decisions ought to be made based on a educational basis rather than a political basis.
See, Jay said something that the candidates are not saying that's very separate and specific. You said for citizenship. That makes sense to me. I think we could have that without declaring it the official language, right? We could just say it's a requirement of citizenship.
It already is.
Why? The only reason that they don't declare English is because it's something that it scares politicians. Because the Republicans, of course, will always say Democrats don't, because what they want more than anything is a mass amnesty so that they can have 10 million new Democrats on the books the next day. Because almost the entire group of immigrants are going to go Democrat. They will.
Right,
That's just.
right.
I mean, that's just fact.
Well, we know what the political parties
it'll change
are
the
for.
parameters of voting in America for the next 50 years.
But it sounds to me like declaring it an official language, one of the callers said it's like declaring the official bird or declaring the official, it's mostly symbolic. Unless you're talking about a specific thing like Jay is saying of emphasizing the importance of it and tying it to citizenship. But let's remember that a lot of people deal with the government every day who are not citizens. They're visiting here, they're doing business here, they're on visas here. And so my question is it practical if you live in a place where there's a lot of foreign language speakers to take down all those signs in other languages, to take away all those forms in other languages? I don't think it is.
No, it's silly.
I think that's silly. Where I grew up in New England, there were a lot of signs in French because of people coming down from Canada.
Quebec, yeah.
I don't remember
me too.
anybody ever bitching about that and saying, "Oh, why do we have to have these signs?"
But
It's
to
no
your-
big deal.
But to your point, your point is that it's not going to make a difference because a realistic government will want to have those helpful signs anyway. There's a difference between saying English is the official language and no government official can ever speak any language other than English.
Then to me, what you're saying is it's really symbolic.
I think so.
Though,
Okay.
as a government official, or if you don't speak English, how would you become a government official in the United States?
No, there's a difference between saying that as a government official you can only conduct
I see what you're
business
saying.
Jay, have you heard
English
some of the
as opposed
politicians?
Some barely speak
Yeah,
English.
they're
as
not
a
speaking
first
English
language.
now.
Yeah,
As opposed to somebody who's bilingual and say, even though you're bilingual and you can talk to this person in Spanish, we're going to prohibit you from talking to this person.
Yeah, being
person in
bilingual
Spanish.
is just, everyone should be. Everyone in the United States, they should force language on all kids. Back when, I don't know if they still do this, most everyone, you kind of had to take a language for a couple of years. We had to take French because we were upstate New York, so we had the French Canadians come down. We didn't have to, we could have taken Spanish, but I was like, when am I ever going to need Spanish? Well, one day I was lost in Laredo, it would have been helpful. But, but now looking back on it, I mean, I made a bad choice. I'm not going to go to Quebec anytime soon again. But
By the way, you should have been there when Jay got directions in French in Laredo. It was something to. All right, let me switch gears a little bit here and ask about this. We learned today that consumer prices rose by the most in a year in February, and that those were driven mainly by gas prices. Yesterday, the president gave a speech about gas prices in which he said, "Do not tell me that we're not drilling. We're drilling all over this country." Does the buck stop with the president on these high gas prices, in your opinion? Are these Obama's high gas prices?
partially.
What do you mean?
Well, I think his demeanor helps dictate prices. I mean, he's showing right now. He said no. He said the Republicans. Your idea is drilling. I can't remember exactly what he said, but it was silly. We're not drilling. All the drilling that's going on right now are from the George Bush administration. Those things that have gone into effect, I believe, was what they had said the other day. He's offered no new drilling sites. He's pretty much put a ban on drilling in America. And we have massive oil deposits here. we need to.
Well,
use our-
what he gets away with is that technically we are producing more oil this year than last year, but it's for the reason you cited. It's for previously approved permits. So, yes, the domestic production has gone up a little bit, but it's not because he's drilling everywhere.
But-
I mean, does anybody really believe that?
Yeah, I think some people want to believe it, but again, those are going to be the people who are going to want to vote for him anyway. I mean, the reality is that he owns a lot of this because he sets the business climate. He's the one that has increased EPA regulations that make it harder for people to do the job they used to do, and that's pull oil out of the ground and get it refined and get it to us. And so, when you do those things, when you with the EPA, try to get farm dust declared as a pollutant. When you're saying that we had a problem in the Gulf, and so now we, in essence, still have a moratorium on drilling in the Gulf. When you say, I'm sorry, we're not going to let the XL pipeline be built and have a ready source of gasoline, raw product coming down to our refineries in Texas. I mean, yes, all of those things set an atmosphere where people say, oh my gosh, gas is going to be more expensive, and then they start looking it up.
That comes down to, anything that the president will utter on subjects of that sort affect speculation and perception in the markets, and you start having the speculation from people that actually affect the stock market or price structures. I mean, it's the speculation thing, it's the commodities thing, that he can be pro oil drilling one day and then prices might go down a little bit, and anti oil the next day and it goes up a little bit. The president carries a lot of power in whatever he says about any subject, and in the case of this, I think all the things you listed and the things that he says affect people's the speculators' ideas about where we'll be a year from now or 5 years from now, and so it starts affecting the bottom line, which is the price.
But it's a good strategy for him, really, because it has two benefits. By not taking the blame and de-emphasizing, his role, he also blunts the ability of his eventual Republican opponent to claim that he could pursue policies that would lower the cost of gasoline.
I disagree. I think if you have whoever the Republican opponent come in and say, we're going to build the XL pipeline, we're going to open up the Gulf
Well, they're going to
waters
say
again.
all that.
Well, yeah, but I think common sense. You believe that people don't see the common sense of that?
Look, if you repeat a lie often enough, Steve, you know the effect of that.
Adolf Hitler
He is
did.
going to repeat the lie. When he was running in 2008, he would often say, we only have 3% of the world's oil reserves, but we use 20% of the world's oil. Now he is saying we only have 2%. I don't know where he's getting these numbers. They're not even close to true. He's telling the lie over and over again that we are an oil-poor nation and that oil itself is something that's about to run out. And, let's face it, Steve, the people are going to fall for that. He's the president.
I disagree in that people will believe you until they look at it and say, you know what, that just doesn't add up. And this is, no, I can't speak for 100% of the American population, but I guarantee you 80% of the population, if something doesn't make sense to them, they're not going to believe it. And when they hear all of these things that most people would say, yeah, that makes sense, that if you have the XL pipeline, we're bringing in more oil, that we then would have lower prices, that if we had more drilling going on, that as you point out in the future, we then would have lower gasoline prices. And to have the president say, I can't do anything to affect the prices, it's beyond my control.
This is what I'm
People
saying, though,
don't-
Steve.
The
People don't get
54% of the people in the United States voted for Barack Obama. Aren't you giving a little too much credit?
Your
to the
logic is
electorate?
fine. I agree with you. But my point is, rather than have the debate, should we or shouldn't we drill on public land? Should we or shouldn't we drill off Virginia or California? Instead of having that debate, he's very cleverly changing the debate to, there's no oil, what are you talking about?
I mean, I understand what you're saying is that he's doing a fine thing politically. You're suggesting that you think it'll work. I'm suggesting that I don't think it'll work because I think that people will see through the argument.
I hope you're right, but I think it's easier for people to be angry at Exxon than it is to be angry at Obama. And I mean, he's doing it. He's being echoed by the media. There's going to be that lone voice of whoever the Republican nominee is, and who knows how effective that person will be. If it's Santorum, not very. Trying to argue, look, when you take into the account the oil, shale oil, and the oil on public lands, we are a very oil-rich nation. We don't have to live like this.
See, they don't have to make that argument. In other words, that argument then centers on the argument that Obama's trying to define the story and define the narrative.
Food, Steve, if this was food, President Obama is starving this nation to death. All right, that's what he's doing with oil. His policies are starving this nation of oil.
And so you don't think people are going to see that? And my point is, just
They
real
haven't
quick.
yet.
Well, but he has done things that little by little affect his credibility. In other words, like the idea about how much the health care was going to cost, less than $1 trillion. Now CBO says it's going to be twice that. And so if you looked at everything just in the isolation,
Right.
there's this particular argument about this, will he win that argument because he's the president, because we give him the benefit of the doubt? Yeah, but if you look at the total sum of the information coming out about his prior statements and his lack of credibility, you are going to get to the point where the straw that breaks the camel's back, and in essence they're going to say, based on the sheer weight of all these things that we now know are not true or he was not honest with us about, we don't believe him about this narrative.
I would love to believe that.
Didn't Barack Obama take a lot of money from oil?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And I just don't. I honestly, I wish I had the faith in American.
Barack
voters
Obama,
that
since
you have.
1991, has had more money from oil companies than any other single politician in America.
He's
Well, and he runs against Wall Street, and yes, his major contributors are the Wall Street people. You
They
know?
but it's code. He knows that the contributors are going to be taken care of. You know, he's not running against all of Wall Street, Steve.
No, he is running against Wall Street in terms of, if you listen to the rhetoric that he puts out to the public. Like,
Yeah, but Wall
those fat
Street is
cats.
GE, and GE will be fine under Obama.
Well,
Wall
sure.
Street are the companies that contribute will be taken care of.
Well,
It's
yes.
cronyism. It happens on both
Who
sides.
Who is president of the President's Business Council? Chairman of the President's Business Council.
chairman
Jeff
of GE.
Immelt. That's exactly right.
Lord.
So my point is that, but he's out there yet in his rhetoric saying, "Oh my God, I'm gonna hurt those Wall Street fat cats. We're gonna make it to where they don't."
They know he
break
doesn't
the
really
local
mean it. Just like
You
gay
think the
people
public
know
does.
that he's not really against gay marriage.
No, you
That's
think-
why they vote for him.
So you think the general public knows that he is being disingenuous when he
Yes.
said? Well, that's my point then. So why do you think they're going to believe him on the oil?
Because they'd rather
they're
be.
stupid.
There's someone else to blame. There's the oil companies.
What, if the
They'll blame them.
So you're telling me that you think that the public doesn't believe him when he says that he's going to be against Wall Street? That they say,
No,
President.
I said Wall Street doesn't.
No, I understand that. But what
The
I'm
people believe it.
well, and that's where I'm saying that again. People hear, okay, I'm going to be tough on the people on Wall Street. Then they see the Jeff Immolts of the world
Right.
are giving him lots of money and tied to him. That's
You
the
may be
sort
right.
of thing
I
that
hope you're
people
right.
say. Okay.
All right, we're going to come back with the lightning round on Gang of Four. It's 11:28 into the newsroom on 550 KTSA.
Sorry about that.
In the case
No,
of
that's
a
Jeff
former
and Steve.
News and talk of San Antonio, 550 KTSA.
All right, Gang of Four enters the lightning round here with Steve Hilbig, Ken Slavin, and Jay LaFarr. By the way, happy birthday, James Madison, today. Today's
All right.
Madison Day. And also today, the introduction of Apple's latest iPad. Anybody excited about that?
I have a Go phone, so I'm not really a technology guy. I don't need anything else. It makes phone calls and texts.
I don't know about standing in line for a new. I've never done that before. Standing in line for a new electronic
Has it ever
gadget.
changed your life?
No.
Has a new
I can
electronic
wait.
thing ever changed your life?
I can
A-Track
wait.
didn't
I'm
change your
able to
life?
wait.
A-Track didn't change your
I don't
life?
need to be the first person with one. But good luck to people who are and who do. Ken, are you a big technology guy?
I mean, to some degree, I've really obviously had to incorporate it into my work, but I didn't get a smartphone until it was given to me as a Christmas present this year. I had been using an old, flip phone. I was just kind of a holdout against it. Don't have an iPad. Seems to me that it's every few weeks that they're bringing out another
There's always something
iPad.
new,
So
yeah.
it's like why? It's almost like why invest in one because it's going to be better in a month.
Yeah.
I see people all the time who tell me they couldn't possibly run a business without their phone.
Yeah.
Businesses run for centuries
Yeah.
without the phone. You can still do things without the phone, although the reality is more and more people are connected that way. But I've learned enough to do things online for clients and to do things in the computer, but I wouldn't call myself a technology geek.